You're out fishing by yourself, having a great time when you catch something special. Maybe it's a really big fish or just a big fish for that particular stream, or maybe you caught the prettiest brook trout of your life. Regardless, you're going to want to preserve that memory, but you're all alone. That means you've got to juggle correctly handling the fish, getting the hook out, setting your rod down somewhere, and grabbing your phone without dropping it in the drink, which I've done a few times. And then you've just got to hope that you get a picture that's worth showing to your friends, your family, and your fishing buddies. Sounds kind of impossible, right? Well, it's not. You've just got to remember a few tips that'll help you get a fantastic photo that you'll be proud to look back on. This week in Untangled, I'll share the tips you need to get an amazing fish photo all on your own. This is Untangled, fly fishing for everyone, presented by Ventures Fly Co. Hey everybody, welcome to it. This is Untangled, and I am your host, Spencer Durant, having more fun than a human being ought to be allowed to have, honestly, and I hope you are too. Hope you're having a great day with it, and I also hope that you're ready to become an amateur fish photographer, because after today's show, the trout are going to be knocking down at your door. They're going to be asking you to shoot graduations, weddings, other parties, family get-togethers, newborn pictures, the whole shebang. You're going to be that good at fish photography. We're opening up a new career path here for you. I mean, that's what we do. we give here at VFC, so you're welcome in advance. But before we get to your new career path, I do just want to make sure I give you a heads up on what we've got in the Q&A section of the show this week, because we had a listener write in a question asking about how do you take that step from beginner to intermediate. And I'm sure most, or probably every angler has asked that same question. How do I get over that hump? How do I go from feeling kind of clueless, maybe a little lost on the water, to feeling confident, feeling like I know what I'm doing. I know I can go out there and catch some fish. What's that transition look like? So we're going to have a lot of fun discussion around that topic, answer that question later on in the show. Make sure you stick around for it. But like we always do every week, we're going to start the show with our main topic, which of course this week is fish photography. So a little story to set the stage here for you. Years ago, I was out fishing this high mountain stream, a pretty small piece of water. And by small, I mean, I could probably jump across it in most places. There's a few spots that are wider, but it is not that big of a stream. And I ended up hooking into a 26-inch cutthroat, which was completely unexpected. I mean, nobody wakes up in the morning unless you're Alex, I guess. He probably does. You wake up in the morning and think, oh, I'm getting to my 26-inch cutty today. It was a huge surprise. I was not prepared for it at all. And because I wasn't prepared for it, the pictures turned out awful. And if you're watching the video podcast, I have some of those awful pictures up on the screen here, so you can see just really how bad they were. I almost didn't want to share them because they're embarrassing. Especially for a professional of my stature now. No, I'm kidding. But the other part of this story, not only were the pictures bad, but when I was fumbling with my phone, I also forgot that one of my vest pockets was open. So when I bent over to get a good angle on the fish, a bunch of my fly boxes fell out and they drifted downriver. So I was stuck in this moment of paralysis because I could either go grab my fly boxes or I could keep taking pictures of the fish. I didn't really get both options. So, spoiler alert, I guess I lost a few boxes of flies, but I got one decent picture of that fish and went ahead and let it go. So that was my first moment when I realized I've got to figure out a better system for taking these fish pictures, because whatever I'm doing now is not working, especially when you get into that, honestly, fish of a lifetime is what that cutthroat ended up being. And thankfully I've come a long way since then in my ability to do that. I've fished a lot. I caught that fish right in the middle of a few years where I was putting between 200 to 300 days a year on the water. So I had a lot of practice at this. This is not maybe it is for some people, maybe it is an inherent skill that you're just really good at, but taking good fish pictures was something I really had to work at, and I've been very lucky and blessed to have a lot of opportunity to do it. So I preface all of this with practice is going to be your best friend. So if you go out and your first couple attempts don't turn out that great, don't beat yourself up. Okay, the more you practice, the better you're going to get at this. It's just like any other skill in life. But there's 4 steps that I take that I follow when I'm taking fish pictures when I'm all by myself. If I've got Alex with me or somebody else, it's a little bit different. But then I've also got a few tips that I'll share on how to make these shots look a little bit more interesting, so it's not just the same as everybody else's, right? We all want to stand out a little bit and show off what we can do. But before we get into the tips of how to take these fish pictures, we have to talk about the most important part of fish pictures themselves, and that is handling the fish.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you're anything like me, you don't want to spend half your fishing day fiddling with knots and tangles or waste precious time switching from rig to rig. That's why we put together our Rigs and Knots Pocket Guide. It's a simple downloadable PDF that you can either memorize or take with you to the river. It shows you exactly how to set up proven rigs and what knots to use, so you can spend less time fumbling with your gear and more time fishing. Snag a free copy by scanning the QR code on the screen or hit the link in the show notes. All right, back to Untangled.
No trout is worth killing just to get a good picture of it, unless you're also planning to eat that fish anyways. And if you want to eat trout, that's fine and wonderful. I've eaten a lot of trout in my day. I still keep a couple every now and then. As long as you're doing it in a place that allows for harvest, tip my cap to you. Fantastic and great job of catching something that'll go on the dinner table. It's a pretty satisfying feeling to eat something you caught yourself. And I'm sure there are going to be some folks that jump in the comments when I'm talking about fish handling. They're going to tell me that, oh, trout are tough. Every fish I release swims off. It never goes belly up and they're all fine. Well, that's just not true. Just because a fish swims off fine after you've released it doesn't mean that you handled it correctly, because even a properly handled trout still has still has a chance of dying from that encounter, because trout are pretty sensitive. They're pretty sensitive creatures. In fact, I've seen some studies that put it at 2% of all well-handled fish die after they release. I've seen some studies that call it as high as 10%. I saw one study that said up to 28% of fish who are handled, even to the best of your ability, who are handled well, they will die if you're fishing in water that's too warm. Because as the water warms up, the oxygen levels deplete, the fish have to work harder to breathe, and then when you hook them, they're working even harder, recovery really tough, and that can do a number on the fish. So that magic number of when you want to stop fishing for trout is about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And Alex and I ran into this last week. We were out fishing, and the water felt really warm, and we actually had one fish go belly up when we released it. So we busted out the thermometer and realized it was at 69, and oh crap, we should have done that earlier in the day. So we stopped fishing. We were in our boat and we just kept floating. We rode through, I think, 3 or 4 miles of river to the boat ramp, not fishing because the water was too warm. And that's not a virtue signal. That's not, oh, look at us, we're so amazing. That's just that is, in my opinion, the proper way to handle water that's too warm. You just don't fish for it. It's not that fun. But the next morning, Alex and I got up earlier, and the water had dropped down to like 61 or 62. It was right in the perfect range, and we got a bunch of good fishing in before a hurricane was off the river, basically. But anyways, warm water is really tough on the fish, and it can cause a lot of mortality. And this is not just me pulling stuff out of my hat. Okay, these are scientific studies carried out by biologists who have a vested interest in us having as many trout on the landscape as possible for anglers to catch. So these are studies you can trust, and I've linked a couple of those in the show notes for those who are interested and want to look at the actual data for themselves. But what this all means is that handling the fish, especially for a picture, is really, really important because trout mortality increases exponentially if you mishandle them. If they're out of the water for too long, if you squeeze them too tight, all these little things can add up to that fish potentially dying instead of growing a little bit bigger and being the fish that surprises you the next time you're out and about. So you've got to keep, there's 5 tips. Yes, I counted correctly. There's 5 fish handling guidelines here you got to keep in mind. And this goes for just catch and release in general, but especially when you're taking pictures, you got to follow these. First thing you've got to do is you've got to keep that fish wet unless you're releasing it or removing the hook or taking the picture. Okay. You want the fish's gills in the water at all times. And then you want to use a rubber or a silicone coated net, because those will remove less of the slime layer on the outside of the fish. The fish, they're all slimy. They're hard to hold on to, and that's actually for a reason, because that slime layer protects them from disease and other issues in the water. And if you reach in with dry hands or you're using a cloth net, it actually rips that slime layer away and makes the fish vulnerable. So always make sure your hands are wet and that you're using that rubber or silicone net to make sure you're not pulling any of the fish slime off. And then, of course, keep them in the water at all times unless you're getting the hook out, releasing it, or taking the picture. Second thing is make sure you don't squeeze the fish. I see pictures all the time, and it hurts my heart when I see people just squeezing the life out of these trout to hold on to them for the picture. Trout got really sensitive internal organs, and as you squeeze them, you risk damaging those. And I've also found in my experience that they respond a little bit better to gentle pressure. I can usually get fish to cooperate. Now, again, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been lucky and blessed to be able to do this as much as I have. So there is some skill that comes along with this when you're handling fish, but they respond a lot better to just gentle pressure than they do to squeezing. I think squeezing really triggers that fight or flight response. Gentle pressure, just holding them gently and firmly, but not squeezing, is really helped. When I started doing that, it really helped me have more control over the fish and posing them for the photos, and even just being able to get the hook out as well. And speaking of the hook removal process, if they're really spazzing out, if they're having a hard time with it, you can turn them upside down, keep them in the water, but turn them upside down. This kind of sends them into a little, not like a shock state, but they will calm them down. You can pull that hook out. And this is a big reason why I recommend barbless hooks so much, because you're not fussing with the hook very much, because usually once the tension comes off of your fly line, so once the fish is in the net, the barbless hooks will just slide right out because the tension's off. I love them. I spend less time dealing with hooked fish with barbless hooks, and it's fantastic. So I can't recommend barbless enough. All right, next thing. Make sure that you do not lay the fish down on rocks or grass or mud. Don't do that. We don't want that fish picture. That's going to remove the slime layer. For one thing, it's going to keep them out of the water for another thing. So they're standing there, they're gasping, they're suffocating. And it really makes for not a good picture at the end of the day, because you want a clean, pretty fish where you can see all the spots and the patterns. And if it's covered in leaves and grass and mud, you don't really get to see that. So don't lay them down on the bank. Keep the fish in the net. That's why we get nets. It's a great place to hold the fish without getting them dirty, removing that slime layer, keeping them out of the water. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but again, barbless hooks, they are just fantastic. It is really hard for me to overstate just how great barbless hooks are. They're a lot easier to get out of yourself. Just the other day, I was fishing with Alex and his dad and brother, and we were walking along some railroad tracks and I stumbled a little bit and was holding my flies in my hand for some reason, and I shoved one of the barbed hooks right through because I hadn't crimped the barb on it yet, and shoved it right through my finger. Those hurt so bad to get out. They are so frustrating, and every time I do it, I think, why did I crimp this barb sooner? So I always crimp those, not always, but I always try to remember to crimp those barbs if I've got a barbed hook. I tie a lot of my own flies as well, so I tie on barbless hooks if I can get them. If not, I just crush that barb with a pair of pliers or your hemostats that you've got on your fishing rig with you out there on the water. And then finally, make sure that you're not lifting that fish out of the water for more than 5 seconds. It's a pretty good amount of time where you can get it up, you can pose it, you can show it off, get a great picture, you put it back in the water, let it go. So if you follow these tips, that fish that you catch has an awesome chance of living. It's going to go out. It's going to go to its all-you-can-eat buffalo joint. It's going to pack the pounds on. It's going to swap stories with its buddies. It's going to get a little gray in its hair. You know, the kids are going to start to drive it nuts. And the next time you run into that fish, it's going to be big. It's going to be bigger. It's going to be meaner. It's going to be nastier. And it's going to be very grateful that you handled it well enough that it could swim off and live and, you know, make some more trout for us and then get bigger and make your day. And who knows, maybe somebody else will catch it and it'll make their day too. So make sure you follow those tips. They're very critically important if we're going to do fish photography. Now, let's get into the actual fish photography tips here. There's 4 of them, like I mentioned earlier. First thing you're going to do, you've caught the fish and it's in your net. So we've already got to that point. Here's what I do. And I'm not telling you this is the only way. This is the process that I follow to get my own fish pictures when I'm by myself. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my rod down on the bank if it's possible. If I'm in the middle of the river and it's a big river and I don't really want to wade all the way back to the bank, then I'll tuck the rod under one arm, or I'll even stick it in between my legs sometimes. But I just keep the tip pointed downstream of me or away from where I'm going to release that fish. And then tip number 2, you're going to get your phone out and ready once your rod's taken care of. You're going to get your phone out and ready, get it in your dominant hand, make sure the camera app is open and ready to go. And then please make sure that all of the pockets on your fishing pack are zipped up. Vest, sling pack, backpack, whatever it is, zip them up because you do not want to lose your fly boxes. Trust me, it is terrible when that happens, especially now because then, you know, I go to Alex hat in hand and say, please, sir, can I have some from our warehouse because I'm all out. And I hate making that request. But anyways, make sure it's all taken care of. Okay, that's step 2. Step 3, at this point, you've got a fly rod tucked under one arm, you've got a camera in one hand, and your net is probably in your non-dominant hand. So where's your third arm come in to catch fish? What do you do with that? Well, what I like to do at this point is, again, I've got the rod tucked under my arm, and that's really rare. I usually have the rod laying down, and that makes this whole process a lot easier. So and if you're going to take a picture of a fish that's this noteworthy and you want to get a good picture of it, it's worth going to the bank for. So I've got the rod laying down, but what am I going to do? I've got all these extra hands, right? I've got everything I need in my hands. I need an extra one. What do I do? Well, I will actually stick the net handle between my legs and just clamp it there so the net won't move, or I will lay the net down on the bank, making sure, of course, that the fish is in the water. I'll just stick the handle up a little bit, and then I'll kneel on the net handle just to make sure that net doesn't go anywhere. And at that point, whether the net's clamped in between my legs or I'm kneeling or standing on the handle while keeping the fish completely submerged, I've got a free hand now. Okay, it's going to be my non-dominant hand because that's the one I've got the camera in, but I've got a free hand at that point. And then with my free hand, I am going to reach into the net. This is step 4. I'm going to reach into the net, lift it slightly out of the water, and then I'm going to tilt the fish towards me just a little bit. I do this so that the light doesn't reflect off the fish's sides too much, which can cause a really blown out picture. And then you don't get to see all those cool spots and patterns and colors and all the little intricate details that make trout so beautiful. And that's half the reason we fish for them anyways, I think, because they're so stinking pretty. And you want that picture to reflect and capture as much of that beauty as possible. So make sure that you tilt it just a little bit towards you. The light isn't shining off of it too much. And then snap that picture, release the fish, boom, you are done. The whole process can be finished in about 30 seconds. It really is that quick and simple. Again, I highly recommend, if you're going to take a picture of a fish that's this noteworthy and this special, then I recommend going to the bank. It's worth it. It's a lot easier to not juggle everything right out in the middle of the river. If you catch a fish that you still want to take a picture of, but it's not a framed picture worthy, but it's still cool, then one other thing you can do is, again, stick your rod under your arm or something. And then with the net, you can just lift the net slightly out of the water and reach over it with your phone and grab pictures of the fish in the net that way. There's some, and those can look kind of cool sometimes too. As long as everything's in focus, those can be an interesting picture sometimes. Now, if you want to spice your pictures up a little bit, add a little bit of flavor to them so they don't look like everything else that's on Instagram. There's 3 little things I do sometimes just to try and differentiate it a little bit. If the fish is really long, you got like an 18-incher or something, what you can do is you're going to hold that fish out as far away from you as possible. And at this point, usually if your buddy's with you, right, you catch a fish and you hold it out to the camera as close to the camera as you can, because that makes it look huge. Well, you want to do that. You want to hold it as far away from the camera now at this point, because that will get the whole fish in the shot. So you hold it as far away from you as you can, and then you tilt the fish slightly upstream. That's going to get you a lot of the fish, if not all of it, in frame. And it's kind of a fun angle, too. It's a little bit different when the fish is facing upstream, kind of quartering away from you. It's a little bit different than a lot of the fish pictures that are out there. It can be a really unique way to show off how long the fish was, and maybe some of the wild brown trout have those really bright red adipose fins, which is the tiny little fin just ahead of the tail fin. It can capture that, all that little detail. So it's a fun pose. You can stick the fish in. Now, if you catch a fish that's too big for a one-handed release, like my 26-incher was, at that point, you're really cursing the fact no one's there. And you really, at that point, that's when you go run up and down the river and look for somebody. No, you don't do that. You want to keep the fish in the water. But at that point, you catch a really big one, too big for a one-handed release. What I like to do is I will actually lay the net down near the bank. Again, the fish is completely submerged. The fish is not coming out of the water at all. But I'll lay that net down. I'll step on the net handle. And then what I'll do is I'll reach into the net, and it doesn't really matter what direction your hand goes, but I'll stick my hand underneath the fish's head and its pectoral fins, which are the fins closest to its mouth. And I'll just lift the head out of the water slightly. And then I'll take that picture of the head and the fins just coming up out of the water. And what that does is that really shows off the girth of the fish, because your hand is a great measuring stick. And if nobody can see your hand behind the fish, or they can just see your thumb on the top of it, or maybe your pinky on the bottom of the fish, that's really going to show off the size of that fish. And then those headshots of the fish, there's a lot of unique detail on the gill plates and gill covers of trout. And those can be really, really fun to stare at as you're going back and remembering some big fish. So that's one way to show off the really big trout. And then another cool picture you can do is you can crouch down low and you can get your phone about level with the water, and then just barely lift the fish out of the water. This works for big fish too. Just barely lift maybe the first half or first third of it out of the water, and let it come up, and then the water's going to be dripping off of it. And you take those pictures that are water level. Those look really cool. or you can even lift the fish to the point where it's like half in and half out of the water. So you're just seeing the top half of the fish. You can take that picture at water level. That looks really interesting as well. And that one's really awesome because it has the added benefit of never taking the fish completely out of the water, which we love. So those are the tips. Those are a few ways that I've found to add a little bit of flavor and flair to my fish pictures. The last thing, just remember, keep your phone somewhere that you can access it easy. I like to wear these fishing shirts when I'm out because they've got zippered pockets and I can just stick stuff in the zippered pockets. If you're not wearing that, just make sure it's in an outer pocket, but a zippered outer pocket on your fishing pack so that you can really easily access it. And then just remember the principles behind all of these pictures, and you can apply these picture tips, and you can apply them any way that you want. And that is be quick with the pictures, handle the fish extremely well to the best of your abilities, and then try to get some unique angles. And if at all possible, move to the bank of the river for your shot, since you can lay your rod down. That's just going to make everything a lot easier. So you can take those principles, you can adapt them to your situation as needed. Now, if you've got any other fish photography tips, something you'd like to share with the audience, or you learned something here, or you've got a follow-up question, please go ahead and leave a comment for us. But we are going to move on to the Q&A section of the show this week, and this is where we spend about half the show directly answering questions from listeners and viewers just like yourself. So if you've got a fly fishing question that you would like answered, there is a link to send those in down there in the show notes, or right here on the screen if you're watching the video podcast. Our first question this week is from Caden from Utah. Writes in and says, "Hey Spencer, been loving the podcast so far. I'm brand new to fly fishing and would not be able to catch fish probably at all, or not even have the motivation to go without this podcast. My question is, what's the best way to get over that hump from the beginner to intermediate level? Obviously, time on the water and better gear, but I would love to hear your advice and experience. Thanks for the great content, and Coke Zero can take a hike." Caden, you're daggum right. Coke Zero can take a hike. Diet Coke all the way. Coke Zero's nasty. Oh, well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot hearing such kind words about the show. So thank you, Caden. I have a question for you, though, before we dive into this. You mentioned that better gear is an obvious way to make that step up as an angler. And I'm curious why you think that, because I don't think that's true. Give you an example. Alex, here at VFC, fishes our fly flinger rod and reel combo. It's an entry-level combo, but it's a fantastic entry-level combo. It's honestly in all my years of reviewing fly rods, it's the entry-level combo I would recommend to everybody, because it's better than a lot of what's on the market. It's a fantastic little setup. But that's what Alex fishes 100% of the time. Every now and then I can get him, if I've got an interesting rod that I'm reviewing or whatnot, I can get him to toss it once or twice. But he fishes the fly flinger religiously. That's his thing. And he does extremely well with it. Y'all have seen our videos. Y'all have seen the fish that he catches. He does a fantastic job with that rod. It works very well for him. And then when we're out shooting all our content for Ventures, I'm running a fly flinger as well. Of course, I'm going to run our product in our videos because it's our videos. I'm going to do that. But I'm also running that rod because it works. It's a good rod. I'm not sitting there on the water thinking I'm limited because I have this rod. Because the reason that you really upgrade your gear, there's some status associated with it. And there's a lot of people who just want to have the best and they don't really care. They want to have the Winston, they want to have the Orvis, they want to have the Sage or whatever. And that's great. But the real reason that you should upgrade your gear is because you are looking for a certain performance out of your gear. For example, I have a whole closet full right here in the podcast studio of Winston fly rods because I love to fish dry flies. That's my favorite way to fish. And Winston's are kind of renowned for being great dry fly sticks. So as I progressed in my own fishing experience, I kind of I gravitated towards that because that's really what I wanted to do. And those are the rods that I really like to use for that stuff. Their performance is just dialed for that. And that's really why you're going to make that change in gear. It's not because you need to, it's because you're looking for maybe a little performance bump, or really maybe you just want it too. And there's nothing wrong with just wanting something else as well. But the point of this whole thing is that the gear does not make the angler. Okay, because as much as I love to fish those Winstons that are in the closet, and as much joy as it brings me to use them, I've caught a lot of nice fish on dry flies with our fly flinger. Probably more, honestly, than I have on my Winstons over the last 2 years. Just last week, Alex and I were out fishing together, got into a little PMD hatch. The fish we were on a tailwater, so we were expecting some picky fish. Alex has the 5-weight fly flinger. He lines it up, bombs a cast from the boat. First cast in front of that fish with the PMD, boom, fish ate it. Okay? It's not about the rod. Okay? Some rods give you different experiences, some rods give you a different feel, and then people really enjoy that. But the gear does not make the angler. Any competent angler should be able to fish any setup within reason and catch fish on it. Now, if you hand me an 8-weight with size 20 nymphs on it and tell me to go catch fish, that might not go very well. That's just not suited to that particular task. But you hand me a reasonable setup, you're going to be able to do it, because it all comes down to how well can you cast, how well can you put that fly in front of a fish and make it look real. And that's what Alex did during that PMD hatch. So again, the gear really is not going to make you a better angler. You're looking to upgrade your gear because you want it to do a specific job. Okay. The thing in my mind that besides dry fly fishing that comes to mind is you want a dedicated streamer stick. So yeah, you're going to upgrade your gear for that, because a 5-weight's not the best if you're going to be throwing a lot of streamers. You want a 6 or maybe even a 7. If you're going to do any kind of tight line nymphing, you want a longer rod, usually a 3 or a 4-weight. Okay. And that's normal. That's natural. That's what you want to have happen. But buying that gear doesn't make you a better angler. You are dialing into a new technique, and then you're becoming a better angler because you have the tools to do it successfully. So hopefully that makes sense. The caveat here is that gear will get in your way sometimes. And the only time that gear gets in your way, that it will actually prevent you from being a good angler, is if you're fishing with a super cheap rod. I'm talking the like $50 or $60 fly rod and reel combos from Walmart. I don't know if Walmart even still sells them, but they did when I was growing up, and I always thought they looked cool. And then I actually bought and fished with one. Any of the stuff, the stuff from big box stores, the really cheap stuff on Amazon, those rods, they're really not fly rods. They're more useful for clubbing the fish to death than they are catching them, because they're just not that great. They make the fishing experience uncomfortable. They're heavy. They're not accurate. They don't have any feel. They're just bad pieces of gear. So that is the stuff that it'll make the fishing, it'll make the experience awful. And then if the experience is awful, you're not going to want to keep doing it. So I really recommend spending no less than $150 on a rod and reel setup to start, because at that price point, the fly fishing industry really has it dialed in at that price point. You're going to get something really, really good at $150. Then obviously you can spend more if you want and get all the other fancy stuff. But those setups, you look at about $150 and up. They're not going to be perfect. Okay, no fly rod is perfect. Not even the $1,500 Tom Morgan Rodsmith's rod that I've got in my closet. It's not perfect. It's amazing, but it's not perfect. But you go to that $150 level, it's going to be a huge step up from the really cheap stuff. So that is my advice on the gear. Don't go super cheap. Get something decent because it's just going to be a better experience all around. Okay. Now that that is out of my system, you're also 100% right. The time on the water is the solution. Time on the water is the only way to go from beginner to intermediate, because you can watch podcasts, you can watch videos, you can read all the literature you want, but until you actually go out there and put it in practice, it's just theory. And so you have to get that time on the water. But a lot of beginners suffer from paralysis by analysis. And what I mean by that is there's so much information out there about fly fishing that beginners try to drink it all in. They want to eat the elephant in one bite. They want to drink from the fire hose. And that causes you to lose focus. And you start focusing on things that really may not matter at the end of the day, especially from a skill development standpoint. Because what it all comes down to, I've said this so much lately, but your job as an angler is to put flies in front of fish and make them look real. That is all you need to worry about. Casting, yeah, it's important. It matters. But if your casts aren't picture perfect, they don't look like they belong in some Instagram reel, don't worry about it. Because the only thing that really matters is that you're getting your fly where it needs to go. If you can do that, you are a successful caster. You might not be a by the book, what's the name of that? The federal or the international fly caster certification. Those guys, you might not be by the book with those guys. And you know what? That's fine. Okay. Because they've set these standards for how a fly rod's supposed to be cast. But if you can get your fly in front of the fish, if you can get your fly where you want it to be, you are a successful caster. Now, you can always improve your casting. I desperately need to work on some of my casting. I've noticed lately it's been really sloppy. I also haven't been out on the water as much lately either. There's been a lot going on. Kind of kept me from fishing too much. But don't worry about it looking picture perfect, okay? All the gear, okay? The millions of kinds of floatant, the bobbers, the pliers, the line cleaner, the leader straighteners, the vest, the hip packs, the slings, the studded wading boots, the boa laces. You can get sucked in to that world and think, I need it all. What do I need? And you're making these lists and you're trying to figure out what you need for a good day on the water. Don't get caught up in that stuff. Okay, because all you need is a rod, reel, line, leader, tippet, split shot, couple indicators, and some flies. That's it. Because the number one thing that you need to focus on is your ability to drift a fly through a spot where the fish are likely hanging out. That matters more than anything else. That is the single most important skill to work on as a beginner, as an intermediate angler, and if you ever get to, I don't know what an advanced angler would be, but that's the skill I still work on, is getting my flies in front of fish and making them look real. I'm still not perfect at it, but that's the guiding principle that I use every time I go out on the water, okay? So what you can do to shorten your learning curve is you can devour all the information about where fish live, how to read water, and how to present your flies. Then focus only on that when you get to the river. And that is going to really help you get up and over the hump. You don't have to worry about learning every single bug. You don't have to worry about whether you've got the right waders. You don't have to worry about whether your rod is nice enough. Okay, put all of your time and effort to putting flies in front of fish and making them look real. And that is how you're going to make that jump. Okay, I promise. It really is that simple. Cut out all the other noise and focus on that. And that, Caden, that is going to make the difference for you. We actually have a crash course video we put together where we took my mother-in-law out. She'd never been fly fishing before. And we took her out and we taught her just the basics, just what I've gone over here. Okay, get the flies in front of fish, make them look real. We taught her the absolute basics, and we filmed the whole thing so you can see that process and watch how simple it actually is and how it results in catching fish. and how you do not need to worry about so many of these other things if you want to actually be successful and start stacking a lot of good experiences on each other and learning from them. So I'll throw a link to that video in the show notes if you'd like to watch it, or on the screen here for those watching the video podcast. But I really appreciate you sending that question in, Caden. Thank you so much. Justin from Canada has our next question, writes in and says, "Hey there, love the show, learning a lot. Been learning this fly fishing game for a couple summers now, as we do not have any water open year round. My question is, why does my dry fly line sink? I am seeing about the first 12 inches sinking. I'm using nylon leader and tippet. My line is only a year old, always clean, and has only been out on the water about 20 times. With our shorter fishing season up here, I can't get out a whole lot with real life and long drives to get to good water." Justin, this is a good question, and you're probably not going to like the answer. I don't think anybody listening is going to like the answer, but fly lines kind of suck right now. They need some serious innovation, because most of the fly lines that I've been using recently, from Cortland, Scientific Anglers, Rio, all of this stuff, they just really haven't blown me away. The tapers are amazing. The way that the line is tapered and how it loads the rod, that part's fantastic. But the durability is just not really been there, and that sucks because lines are expensive now. Even the Cortland 444 Peach stuff is, relatively expensive. And again, I've had issues with just about everything. So I think it's a problem with lines in general, but there are other issues at play here, because fly lines should be cleaned about twice a year to keep them in great shape. That's a bare minimum. Some folks I know clean them a lot more than that. But mild soap is really all you need. You just put it on a dish towel or something and then run the line through it, clean all the dirt and grime off of it, and then let the line dry completely before you put it back on the reel. There are some companies out there that make line cleaning solutions as well, so you can buy that if you really want to, but just some mild soap is really all you need. Now, most of the dirt and grime in the fly line is going to be in that first few feet of it, because that contacts the water more than the rest of the fly line. And that is where all that junk's going to get soaked up, all the dirt and the grime. And as that gets absorbed into the fly line coating, it's going to lose some of that buoyancy and it's going to start to sink. So that's one issue. But the biggest culprit, and the one that I think most anglers are overlooking, and the one that causes the line to sink more than just being dirty, is any abrasions and any cuts to the fly line itself. If your line ends up wrapped around branches or rocks or on the ground or in the sand, or you step on it, there's an extremely high chance that you've cut it, you made some kind of small abrasion, and even a small cut or abrasion starts to let water, dirt, and grime get inside, and that's really going to tank the buoyancy of your fly line. And who among us doesn't get their line wrapped around trees at least once when you go out? I went out, Saturday for a couple of hours, and I was in the tree my first cast in. I set the hook on something, I was in the tree. So, it happens. You're in the tree. It's going to be hard on your fly lines. Now, at that point, when you've cut into the fly lines and they're just kind of, you've made those cuts and those abrasions, really not much you can do, unfortunately. And that's what really sucks. What you can do is you can just keep fishing it until it sinks too much or it sinks too quickly to be effective anymore. But to where your line is only sinking in that first 12 inches or so, you can really just cut that foot of line off, and then you could nail knot a piece of 20-pound monofilament to the end of your fly line. And then you could do a perfection loop at the end of that monofilament, or you could nail knot your leader to that as well and get a really smooth transition. But if you want that loop-to-loop connection for your leaders, and you can just tie that perfection loop off the end of the mono. Cutting off 12 inches from the from the head of the fly line is not going to hurt it, but I wouldn't go much more than that because the tapers on these fly lines are such that the heads are designed to roll out and land a little bit softly for most of them because you want to be able to present your flies delicately. But if you start cutting too much of that back, you get into the thicker part of the line, and that's going to land with a lot of force on the water, and you're not going to have that same delicacy that you had when the line was brand new. So the short of it is that most fly lines is pretty meh from a durability standpoint. It's just something you're going to have to replace pretty consistently, unfortunately. Spending more on fly line will help that problem sometimes. I know that my more expensive lines that I've been running, they start to sink after about a year of use, but granted I'm on the water quite a bit. But regular cleaning is going to help extend its life. Just plan on fly line being something you replace pretty consistently, especially if you're buying those cheaper $40, $60-ish lines, which I know it's crazy to think that's cheaper, but that's what's cheaper these days. So clean the line, make sure you're not cutting it up too much, try and take as best care of it as you can, and that's really all you can do, fortunately. So thanks for sending the question in, though. I appreciate it. Mick from Ireland has our next question, writes in and says, "Hey, Spencer, I'm a new follower. Thanks for all the great tips. Love the content. After watching your video on locating trout, I had my best session yet, landing multiple browns the next day. I'm getting more serious about trout fishing and recently upgraded to Simms Guide carbon waders after using PVC and neoprene. When choosing boots, I noticed options like felt soles and cleats. Could you explain when each is best used and also touch on the key differences between entry-level and high-end wader setups?" Mick, it's great to hear from you. Thank you. Felt is the undisputed king of grip for wading boots. So felt-bottomed wading boots will grip better than anything else, especially really slippery streams, places that are hard to wade. Felt's fantastic. It does a great job. But felt is awful for hiking in. So if you are moving around a lot outside of the water, you're putting any kind of miles on your boots on a normal day of fishing, felt does not have very much traction at all in the dirt. It's just really not comfortable to hike in. And then felt also has the unfortunate ability to transfer microorganisms from one water body to another. Those organisms can actually live in the felt until your next time on the water and then spread into new river systems. And that's one way that we've got some invasive species issues going on. New Zealand mud snails are a problem in some rivers out here in the West. They can be transferred on felt wading boots. Whirling disease can even be transferred on that. And whirling disease is a problem that causes spinal deformations and feeding issues in trout. It can even kill them if it gets bad enough. So you definitely want whirling disease out as much as possible. So as great as felt is, it's not an option I recommend to anglers for that reason. It's just not very good from the environmental standpoint. In fact, Alaska's even banned the use of felt completely on any of its rivers to prevent all these issues. So you cannot use felt boots in Alaska. Cleats or studded rubber soles, which is what I believe you're referring to, that's the best option. A lot of the new rubber soles that are coming out from manufacturers right now are fantastic. They are amazing. I really love the new soles on the Squala RS and Carbon wading boots. They just grip. I haven't even had to stud mine yet because they grip so well. And studding them, that's just putting little aluminum screws in the bottom that give you a little bit of extra bite. I haven't even had to do that to mine because they've been so grippy. But studded rubber is the next best thing behind felt. They're great. I highly recommend going that way, and that's what I'd recommend to anybody. Get your rubber boots, stud them. You can buy little kits to stud them. Usually every wading manufacturer sells one. And then boom, you are in business. They're great for hiking. They're great for wading. They're just fantastic. Now, as far as the low end and the high end wading setups, I'm going to drop an opinion here. I don't know if folks are going to agree with this, but I at this point, I think the only real difference between high end and low end waders is price. because I've been using the really nice stuff. I've been using the expensive waders, the $800 ones. I even got one pair that retails for almost $1,000, and they've all sprung leaks in the last couple of years. Even the cheaper $500 waders have sprung leaks pretty quickly, more quickly than I would think. I'm not putting 200-300 days a year on the water anymore. I am lucky to get to 100 right now, just with everything going on. So I'm not putting the abuse on the waders that I used to, but I'm still just not seeing that performance from the top end stuff that I feel like I should. Now, I'm gonna add a caveat that it's been a very long time since I've used any of the cheap waders. But I have a really hard time right now recommending to folks to go out and drop $800-900 on a pair of waders because they all leak. Every wader will eventually leak. That's just the truth of it. They will eventually spring a leak. But I just don't feel like I'm getting the lifespan that I would like to out of the high-end waders. So I've actually started keeping a log of when I'm fishing a certain pair of waders, because I had one wader manufacturer tell me that their goal is to get you 100 days in that wader before there's an issue, before there's a leak or maybe there's a seam issue. They want 100 days of use. So I'm putting that to the test to actually make sure that I get my 100 days before that happens. So when you look at it that way, though, a high-end pair of waders, and they should. I think I've had a run of bad luck, and I'll get into this in a minute. But most high-end waders are going to give you that time frame. So if you only fish 20 days a year or so, high-end pair of waders makes a lot of sense because it's going to last you 4 or 5 years. And it will certainly last a little bit longer than the cheaper stuff because we know those will leak quickly. But then you do have a good chance of not getting a quick leak in the higher end stuff. So that extra cost might be worth it. The higher end waders, they're also going to come in a lot more sizes, so you can find something that fits you well, and fit is key. If your waders don't fit right, they're going to fail very quickly. They're also very uncomfortable if they don't fit well. And high-end wader manufacturers often have a ton of different sizes that really get you dialed in on the fit. And then you usually get more pockets in the high-end waders as well. So they've got more features to them. They're also going to come with a decent warranty, so you can get your waders fixed if there is a problem, but it sucks to be out waders when you can't wet wade, like in the middle of winter or early spring. It really sucks to not have a backup pair on hand. So with all that in mind, I am going to fall back on my usual advice, which is buy the best stuff that you can afford. Because I think my experience lately has been a combination of bad luck on my part, and me being fat. So my waders don't really fit all that well. And I think that is causing the bulk of the issues that I've been having. But I felt like it was important to share that experience. I also really put my waders through a lot of abuse, a lot more than most anglers do, because I'm doing a lot of hiking in them. I'm doing a lot of kneeling, a lot of bushwhacking, a lot of crawling along banks, especially when Alex and I are out filming or trying to get the right shot. Our waders definitely get a lot more abuse, I think, than your typical, I'm just going to go to the river and fish anglers. So take my opinion with that little bit of grain of salt. Your high-end waders usually end up being worth the money. Everybody that I've talked to that ends up buying them, they all say that. They all say it's been worth the money. Just don't go into it expecting a completely leak-free experience, because that's just not realistic. So hopefully that helps. I appreciate it. And with that, folks, we're going to move on to the Live Your Life moment of this week's show. Every week, we end the show by sharing a story from folks who are out there on the water living real life. I love to hear the stories, see the pictures of y'all out there having fun. So if you've got a Live Real Life moment you would like to share, there's a link to send those in the show notes, or right here on the screen if you're watching. the video podcast. And this week's Live Real Life moment is from Zach. I grew up in Utah and have loved fishing since I was big enough to hold a rod, but didn't start fly fishing until I was about 15. It's been another 15 years now, and although I occasionally break out the spinning rod, my preference has been fly fishing, especially on rivers. About 4 years ago, I moved to Tucson, Arizona for work, and fly fishing has been a rarity ever since. However, a couple months ago, we traveled back up north to see family and friends, and I had a whole day reserved to do what I love. I chose to go to what I believe to be an underrated body of water, a river I grew quite familiar with during my time in college. Much better place than the Provo, better ice cream too. There was one particular stretch that I've always wanted to fish, but had never gotten to, but that was going to change. Another bonus of this trip was being able to spend some time with my brother-in-law, who was also a fly fisherman, and his young son on the river. It was going to be a long day for my nephew. I wanted it to be a successful trip for him. So before we went to the planned stretch, I put us in an area I knew fish would be. The morning was a bit chilly, and as we were planning on wet waiting for the day, my nephew and brother-in-law pulled out the spinning rods. It didn't take long, and my brother-in-law hooked up on a decent brown. After a few more hours of fishing, and he and I catching a handful of browns and cutthroats, my nephew still hadn't hooked up on anything yet. We were approaching another run I had historically been successful in. My nephew decided it was time to try a fly rod for the first time. After a few minutes of practice casting, we moved forward and got him in position. It didn't take too long before he was able to place a beautiful cast, and as my brother-in-law and I watched, we saw a large brown come up and hit the dry fly. My nephew did not, but to his credit, when we both shouted for him to set the hook, he did, and the fight was on. He ended up landing the fish. We snapped some pictures and sent it on its way. He was able to land a few more, get some more pictures, and we even made it to the stretch of river I wanted to get to. It didn't disappoint. Love your YouTube channel and podcast. I'm back in Tucson now and just trying to figure out when I'll be able to get the fly rod out again. Until then, ventures, videos, and other YouTube fly fishing will have to do. Zach, that was awesome. That is so stinking cool. That is what Live Real Life is all about. That's what VFC is all about. That's what we're talking about here. Having those experiences, doing it with family. You can't beat it. So I got nothing else to add, man. Thank you so much for sending that in. And with that, folks, we're going to wrap the show up this week. Thank you for listening to the entire show. It means more than you know. And if you haven't already, please make sure you rate and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to it. The more ratings and subscriptions we get, the more folks we can help live real life. That's our whole goal here at VFC. We want to help you get out there on the water and enjoy yourselves. So until next week, do just that. Get out in the water, have some fun fishing, and live real life.